Hello and welcome to another episode of the Cyber Threat Perspective. This time we have me, Spencer, my webinar. So this is the Windows Misconfigurations webinar that I did a couple weeks ago now, where I go through all of the common misconfigurations that I see in Windows, the stuff that I normally see during internal pen tests. And I go through step-by-step 7 misconfigurations, how to find them, how to remediate them, some bonus like remediation, action items to help further improve your environment, improve the security environment, harden your Windows endpoints. So this is a webinar that I did a couple weeks ago. Hope you enjoy it. Hope you get value from it. If you want, there are freebies at the end. So during the webinar, I gave away a bunch of free things. That's at the end of the webinar. So if you want to skip ahead, go for it. You want to listen to the whole thing, I would love you to listen to it. And I hope you get value from it. So make sure you go to the end, get the freebies, and we will see you in the next episode. So as I was going through this presentation, I'm like, there's probably some creative titles that we can make out of this presentation because mine is kind of boring. So these were some of the funny ones. How Windows fails to be secure by default and what you're doing to make it worse. It's just great. And then slop, is great. Security lapses on PCs. The misconfigurations giving hackers the upper hand is like the definitive title of this. So if I were to rename this, I'd pick one of these because they're super funny. But I wanted to be serious for just one moment and start out with this presentation to say, I believe that one of the biggest problems in security right now is defenders who don't get the tools and support they need to secure their organizations. So through my content, through the webinars, through everything we do, through the assessments that I do, it's really me dedicating myself to empowering and arming and weaponizing the information that we have to help spread that information to everybody who needs to hear it. And one of the biggest problems is security topics, IT topics. They don't get enough airtime and enough marketing, if you will. And I've made it my mission lately to share the information that I've learned from all the great people that I've learned from. So that is what I'm up to. And I hope that this presentation, I hope that this webinar delivers on that promise for you. I really, really do. So please stay till the end. I'm not going to sing the song, but please stay. I've got something special for everybody who's come to the webinar just for you. It's free. I'm going to give it out at the end. So a quick story. An attacker went from a single Windows machine to full domain admin in under 90 minutes. They didn't use 0 days, malware, or nation state tools. They abused common misconfigurations that exist in thousands of environments. So in this webinar, we're going to look at exactly those misconfigurations and how you can identify them and fix them before attackers can abuse them. And a little PS, this is not a made up story. That's actually how our internal pen tests go many of the times. And if you read the DFIR report and threat intel, you know that this is a common theme with attacks. So real quick, for those who don't know who I am potentially in this, a lot of you said you're coming from X, so you probably have followed me a little bit, but real quick, both for the recording, for people who don't know who I am. So my name's Spencer. I am a internal pen tester at Secure IT 360. Secure IT 360 is a full service cybersecurity consulting firm. We do everything from pen testing to gap assessments to SOC and monitoring, and a little bit of digital forensics and incident response. I very much like to say that I have a spirit of a hacker, heart of a defender. I'm a recovering sysadmin, if you will. I come from an IT sysadmin background. That's how I come up the ranks. I've done some pen testing and done a lot of certifications, but my main kind of thing when I'm not doing pen testing is tools and content and a little bit of swag, as you can see on the screen there. I like making t-shirts and stickers and stuff like that. If you want to find any of my links to social media or like my newsletter, it's there on the screen. But App Locker Inspector is a tool that I made just last week and released that helps you audit your App Locker configuration. And it's previewed in this webinar a little bit, so we'll get into that. Script Sentry is a tool to find dangerous and misconfigured logon scripts. And I'm an emotional support coder on the Locksmith team. Jake is a buddy of mine, a really good friend. And so I've helped a little bit. I've contributed a little bit of code to that. But those guys are great. And you can see all the other stuff we do there. So that's a little bit about me for those who don't know. So when it comes to endpoint security, there is more than meets the eye. And because I only have an hour, this webinar only is going to cover kind of a small part of everything that we really care about when it comes to endpoint security. So the things you see with an arrow next to them are the things that we're going to cover in this webinar, but there's a lot of things that we're not going to have time to cover. This is a very big topic, actually. And when analyzing endpoints, particularly Windows endpoints, it's important to consider how the host operating system and the security products are configured. So for example, the Windows updates, auto runs, firewall rules, the path information, the software that's installed itself, the third-party software. Then from a security standpoint, we would look at App Locker. We'd look at the antivirus and EDR products. Are there exclusions? Are there weak configurations that would allow us to bypass AMSI? For example, I saw an antivirus product that you could just turn off the AMSI monitoring, interestingly. So there's a lot of things that make up endpoint management, endpoint configuration, and endpoint security that might not be super obvious if you don't do these assessments every day. So this is what I like to call our 120-point inspection. It's a methodology I developed for our internal pen tests to do this very thing just across our client base. And it's one part of our internal pen test. I'm not going to get into this, but I just wanted to mention that the endpoint evaluation itself of what we are going to talk about here is kind of just one part of our internal assume breach pen test methodology. So the misconfigurations themselves, these are the 7 that we're going to talk about. So there's 7 misconfigurations that I went through based on the research that I've done, the internal pen tests that I've done, the clients that I've spoken to, the people that I've spoken to that are outside of pen testing. These are all the ones that I think are kind of some of the more pressing ones. Now, this is not an exhaustive list. Obviously, you probably think of a handful right off the top of your head that are not included here. But again, 1 hour, I guess now 53 minutes. So this is what we're going to go through. So misconfiguration number 1, weak local admin control. So this is a bucket category for using the same local admin password for every local administrator account, or just excessive local admin privileges. So I wanted to enumerate some of the bad things that could happen from this misconfiguration, right? So stealing passwords or password hashes from disk, memory, browser, things like that. You could create new local admin accounts, for persistence. You could deploy persistence or install remote access tools or install other software that you could use for persistence or for whatever nefarious needs you have. You could disable antivirus. And we're going to talk about that more in a second. You could disable the antivirus or EDR, disable logging. Obviously, you can encrypt the device. You could maybe use the weak local admin account and maybe the credentials to pivot to other machines in the environment, which is absolutely something that we've done before. Obviously, key logging, modifying security settings, clearing event logs, and the list kind of goes on and on. But I just wanted to enumerate some of the bad things that can happen when you have weak local admin control. And one of the more pressing and kind of recent developments has been that it turns out that one way to disable EDR is with a free trial of another EDR. And Mike Madron, Mike, who is in the chat, I believe somewhere, I minimized the chat, Mike Manrod and Bushido Token, they posted some stuff online, and Mike and his colleague Ezra wrote up an article about this that you could see EDR on EDR violence on Medium. So they wrote this article about how this kind of attack takes place, all because of weak local admin control, right? If I can install an EDR product onto another host that has already an EDR product on it, I can make my EDR kind of take over. And then that other one is not doing anything. It's not effective, right? It's just sitting there, not really listening. So they found out through their article, and it's linked here, that there was a few interesting things. One, it's easy to get free trials, and that's absolutely true. You can go get free trials of ESET and all those other antivirus products and even EDR products. You can use the EDR products RMM features, for like CrowdStrike. They have like this remote, command thing where you can issue commands on the machine. Well, that's very reminiscent of a C2, like a threat actor would. So it's very trivial to install these and kind of block the other EDRs that are on the host. So I have them linked here. Definitely go follow them. They spoke at Black Hat this year. They speak at many conferences. Mike is a friend. I definitely like all the stuff that he puts out. So definitely a good follow, and somebody who's always publishing research. Those two guys always publishing research. They've got a lot of cool tools. So check out their GitHub. Really, really cool dudes. So how else does weak local admin control present itself? Well, in one instance, I was doing a pen test and there was this make me admin product that was there. And I guess the use case was, if a user needs to, install a printer or they need to do something, they need to have local admin rights to do it. Well, the problem is when you do this, it literally adds the user to the local admins group. And then I can just create a new user and use that for persistence or just, carry out whatever I want to carry out. So that's essentially what you can do with this is you make yourself an admin, you disable Defender or disable the EDR, you dump credentials, and then you pivot. And that's exactly what I did in one engagement. I got SCCM credentials that got me access to a server, and then we kind of went on from there. But it all started because of this weak local admin control. And in this case, it was this make me admin software. So how do we convince leadership that local admin rights aren't just, being annoying? And I posted this on Twitter, and there were some really good responses that I wanted to convey here. From Sean here, it says, users not having local admin rights is table stakes these days. Robert Graham, we're decades past the point where local admin rights should be removed. And, it's not about showing them that they can achieve the same thing in another fashion. It's that showing them the risk of avoiding and showing what they can take, showing them a risk they'd be avoiding, rather. And I like this last one too, because it really speaks to the IT operations aspects of it, is that it's easier, it's orders of magnitude easier to just deploy a machine without local admin than it is to give somebody local admin and then have to take it away, right? So if you're deploying new machines, consider that approach. So this remediation, or the fix, if you will, for weak local admin control is one, use labs. It's super easy. It's automated. It is a very, very good control, and it gets you, really good protection right out of the gate, built into Windows, and even Intune now, and it's free. Don't allow regular users to be local admins. Obviously, this makes sense, but for some, the things that we think are obvious, we maybe take for granted because we've known them and they make sense to us. So don't allow regular users to be admin, and don't allow them to auto elevate to local admin. There's a number of products where you can deploy them and they can request to admin. And maybe if you have some approval process, that might work, but don't just allow them to auto elevate without, some process in place to validate it. And then one of the most common things I see when I do purple teams and internal pen tests is, not alerting on the addition of new local admin accounts. So it's very common that we will create a new local admin account just for persistence, if you will. And that usually doesn't generate an alert, unfortunately. So definitely alert on new local admins added to your workstations. And then the last bonus tip is don't allow domain admins to log into regular user systems. And that's as simple as just removing them from the local admins group. Don't let them log in to end user systems. And you are very much off to the races here. All right. So we are 14 minutes in and we are making great pace. So I love it. So next, what's insecurely installed / configured software. So this is when software gets installed with insecure default configurations. So this is the vendor itself has configured it to install and set certain permissions or properties such that it's insecure, or where software is intentionally misconfigured after installation. Those are kind of the two categories that I see. So again, I wanted to enumerate some of the, the fallout of this. So what I commonly see is, software is installed in user writable locations. It's installed at the root of the C drive. It's the system path, the installation directory of the software is added to the system path. And because it's writable, that's an exploitable configuration. Insecure permissions on the program files installation directory, insecure registry permissions, installer running an installer that loads files from untrusted locations. So like, the user's temp directory kind of thing, hard-coded credentials, debug information, writable side-by-side assembly components. So that's like a program that's calling a DLL, but that DLL can be modified. And then the last one is insecure MSIs or third-party installers. So again, not an exhaustive list, but I've seen each and every one of these on internal pen tests, and definitely seen all of these before. So installing, this is kind of a combo one, but installing software at the root of C, this is a misconfiguration from the vendor. This software gets installed, and it gets installed at the root of the C drive. And for those who are not aware of this, when you create a new folder at the root of C on Windows, by default, authenticated users get modify rights on that folder and everything within it. So if you install some piece of software at the root of C, it now has a permission such that authenticated users can modify anything within that folder. So as a persistence mechanism, I could just replace, this expert launcher.exe with my own malicious exe. And then whenever the system starts, that my malicious program is going to run. And of course, if there are other pieces of that software that run from that, I can modify those. Maybe there's privileged processes that run under an elevated context, or they run as system. I can now modify those. So obviously, this can be a very dangerous control. Same thing with like the Citrix program that I found on an internal pen test. And this just shows, I use this screenshot to show the permissions. So when you create that folder on the root of C, it gives authenticated users modify rights unless you change it. And this is an example of one particular misconfiguration where the software was installed and then it added itself to the system path, because you need to be able to run perl.exe or whatever the name of the binary is, of course, without giving it the full path. So this is a case where you can actually perform what's called DLL hijacking. So because of this misconfiguration, in the next couple slides, you can do what's called DLL hijacking, or path interception, as it's commonly referred to in the pen testing space. But this screenshot here shows that I have ctemp add to the system path, and I copied PowerShell exe to ctemp, and I just called it calc.exe. And then when I run calc, it actually runs PowerShell. So this can be very dangerous. And then obviously, if you have privileged processes that are running, you can use it to kind of hijack how Windows calls those DLLs and those binaries. And this is an example of kind of what my typical exploit path would be for this on an internal pen test. So there's something called ghost DLLs or phantom DLLs in Windows. And one such DLL is the DLL for task scheduler. It's called WPTS extensions.dll. It doesn't exist in Windows, but when Windows starts, when it boots up, it looks for this DLL and it tries to load it. Well, if we have a writable system path, we could just drop this DLL into that path, and now we can execute code as system, because those get all loaded as system. So definitely kind of an interesting, nuanced one, but one I see very often. Another example are third-party Windows installers. So you may not know this, but some Windows installers, you can actually stop them as they're going, like as it shows on the left-hand side here. And you can actually open up the settings for the terminal for the command prompt. You click on the little hyperlink. It brings up a dialog, says you want to open up Internet Explorer. You're like, okay, sure, open up Internet Explorer. And then you can open up a save dialog, and then you can get to command prompt. And if that process, that installation process or uninstallation, is running as system, you can just open CMD and run it as system, as it shows here in the bottom right. So really interesting things. This one is very prevalent, very, very prevalent, along with MSIs that call things from like temp directories when you do uninstallations. And we'll see that more in a minute. But shout out to Andrew Olivo. I don't know if I'm saying your name right. I apologize. He works for IBM now, I think on the X-Force team, but this is an article that he wrote for Mandiant. Really good article that talks about how these third-party MSIs or Windows installers can be vulnerable to this type of attack and others. So the fix for this, review permissions on installation directories. Obviously, you want to make sure that regular users don't have permissions to modify things. Review the software for misconfigs after installation, particularly like updates and upgrades. So what I've seen before is like you install a product, you reconfigure the permissions, you're like, okay, good to go. The product updates or does an upgrade, and then all of those settings get misconfigured again. And I've seen that before. Don't install software at the root of C if you can avoid it. And then review the system path for writable directories is a really good tip. All right, lack of third-party patching, lack of patching third-party software. So this is where third-party software is not patched itself or where it's not patched quickly enough. So I was doing another internal pen test one time. I found that Splashpwn, that's the name of the exploit that I created. Gosh. Splashtop. So Splashtop is like an RMM product, like a remote access tool. Part of our endpoint evaluation, our 120-point inspection, if you will, is to look at all the software that's installed, check it to see if there's any CVEs, and then if there are, we check to see if there's exploits. So as part of my process, I found that there was a local privilege escalation with Splashtop. It's like, okay, cool, I have this, but there's no exploit code for it. So I reverse engineered the CVE and kind of the documentation that was given for the vulnerability and created an exploit for it. Now, this was a year after this had been published. So as you can see on the left, the patch for the Splashtop version was released in January 2022. And my initial commit for this exploit when I created it was January 2023. So a year later, I found this, created an exploit, and exploited it. And it just speaks to the third-party patch management process. Another example, just recently, I was working on an internal pen test, found that there was an older version of Perl. That was a screenshot you saw earlier. It put it in the path as well. And obviously, so this version, as you can see, is from 2015. Plenty of versions behind. And I used ChatGPT, so that's what this is on the right. So if there are any errors here, it might have made up some stuff. But I wanted to articulate, old software is vulnerable software. There's just no way to cut it. And because of that, there was a ton of vulnerabilities with this version. So my main takeaway for third-party software is very simple, in my opinion. It's identify third-party software on all of your endpoints, patch it as quickly as you can on a regular basis. And then thirdly, and maybe the most important, is get notifications about vulnerabilities to your tech stack. Had the client had some insight into, Splashtop or vulnerabilities that affected their software, maybe they would have caught it a little bit sooner. Great resources, by the way, vulncheck.com/KEV and CISA's known exploited vulnerabilities catalog, the KEV. That's a list of vulnerabilities that are known to be exploited in the wild. So if you're like me and you're like, how do I patch all 10,000 vulnerabilities? Well, you don't patch them all at once. You pick the ones that are most important. And you can do that using some of the information and intelligence that some of these third parties will provide, like CISA. They provide this KEV list, which is really great. All right. Weak endpoint security. This is a personal favorite of mine. I love dismantling EDR products, bypassing them, finding ways to get my tools to run past EDR and things like that. So this is endpoint security products out of date, configured with excessive exclusions, not enterprise grade or endpoint only monitoring. So what does a weak endpoint security look like from an exception standpoint? These are taken directly from engagements that I've had. I've just recreated on my system so I can have good screenshots. But the most common kind of exclusions I see are path exclusions, where user profiles or temp directories or even network shares are excluded from scanning. And obviously that's dangerous for a number of reasons. There are legitimate reasons to have exclusions, but those are some of the more common ones to look out for and to check against your systems. Process exclusions. So, for example, here, adderant.exe, if you're just excluding them based on the process, those are easily hijacked and abused. So be on the lookout for that and don't over exclude things based on the process alone. And then extension, I've seen all sorts of weird and crazy things excluded, from like whole PowerShell scripts to docm files to all sorts of interesting, file types that you might not expect would be, executable or be able to be used to abuse that endpoint. Another example, and just to point out that it's not just Defender, that we see exclusions in, it's third-party products as well. And this is not a dig at ThreatLocker by any means. Super cool product. I'm down for it. This is to point out the ability for IT admins and security people to make mistakes to include these exclusions. So this is an example where this Adorant path was excluded from this app control policy. And this is the one path I needed to be able to run my tools on the client's endpoint. Had this been blocked, I would have had a much, much more difficult time. Obviously, there are legitimate reasons for excluding programs. If there's problems with the antivirus scanning it, doing memory inspection, things like that, it makes sense. My only point here is to encourage folks to look at the exclusions they have, limit them, and document them, and make sure they're not too overly permissive. And one of the last things on the weak endpoint security section is I don't like telling people to buy X in order to get Y, but in this case, traditional antivirus just doesn't cut it. If you have Symantec or McAfee or ESA, traditional antivirus just doesn't work anymore. It's not sufficient for protecting the enterprise. And you have to get something that's more robust and more enterprise grade. And lastly, for weak endpoint security, I keep saying lastly, I think I'm almost at the end of this section. But what if we evade detection locally? Or what if we execute our attacks from a host that doesn't have EDR? Or what if, like earlier, we deploy our own EDR on top of the existing EDR so that EDR doesn't see what we're doing, right? The whole point is we shouldn't rely on one, detection layer alone. We should have, detection in depth, if you will. And we need to start thinking about non-endpoint based detections in addition to the endpoint based things. So I've listed some of them here, like unusual object ACL modifications on sensitive OUs and AD. I can't tell you how many times I've modified a security group or done something in Active Directory that hasn't been alerted on that could have easily been alerted on if the auditing and monitoring was in place. Creation of new admin accounts, replication requests if you do like DC share or DC sync rather, Kerberoasting, impossible travel, SMB enumeration, right? If you're scanning for SMB shares or if you're enumerating the files within an SMB share, which is very common, those are all things that have a certain amount of, detection surface, if you will, to use a fancy term, that are very, very straightforward to detect if you have the right tools in place. And of course, lateral movement, we're going to see that in a little bit. But using lateral movement protocols outside of normal baselines. So we have to get to a point where we supplement endpoint telemetry with network and identity, and also deception, as we'll see in a minute. So weak endpoint security, kind of the fixes: review the endpoint security configurations, making sure that the exclusions are limited, that you document them, and that they're reviewed on a regular basis, right? I never like to advocate to just have a permanent exclusion to something, depending on what it is. So have a recurring process to review those, no matter what they are. And then use enterprise-grade products. I think that goes without saying. But then also start looking, if you've got EDR in place, you've got an MDR provider, you're pretty good with your security stack, start venturing out and looking at identity and network monitoring. There's a lot there that you can do that's going to increase your ability to detect threats if for whatever reason EDR is bypassed or you're attacked from a non-EDR covered endpoint. So one of those things that I really love is deception. There's a couple of companies that I'm fond of. I've talked a lot about deception if you followed me. So Thinkst is super great. The Canary tokens are hands down some of the best deception you can get. And oh, by the way, they're free. Hands down, really amazing free tool that they have provided to the community. Super awesome. They also have a commercial tool as well that I hear is absolutely amazing. Diffused also, by the way, if you're like a threat researcher, threat intel, that's kind of more the angle of this that I would encourage you to take a look at. Super cool. Full transparency. I know Simo. We talk often and kind of strategize and talk about what he's doing, but I'm a big fan of this. I'm a big fan of the direction that they're going with diffused. So super cool. But the point is to use deception, use identity monitoring, network monitoring, use all that you have to detect threats faster, quicker, easier, more high fidelity. So these are just a couple of the resources that I have. I did a webinar on deception. If you missed that, definitely go check it out. We've talked about this on the podcast before. And then I also talk about this pretty regularly in my newsletter. I would love if you would check it out if you're interested. So insecure services and tasks. Awesome. So this is when services or scheduled tasks are running with excessive privileges, or they're using weak or stored credentials, or we're running executables from writable locations, or unquoted service paths. So that's what we're going to talk about next. So this first one is unquoted service paths. Now, by default, users can't write to program file directories. However, as you'll see in a minute, there are some issues with just relying on that safety mechanism alone. But in this case, if there are spaces in the path to the executable in the service, and there's no quotes around it, you can plant malicious programs in that path if you have permissions to write there. So for example, as you see in the bottom middle here, C program files, legit software, I put totally.exe here. And when I run this service, it's going to run my malicious executable because of the way that Windows search order works. Search order, super nerdy thing. It's just the way in which Windows looks at a path to load the binary. It will look at each of the kind of the subsections and say, is it here? Is it here? Is it here? And until it gets to the full path, if it's not quoted. So if it's not wrapped in quotes. And here's a little PowerShell snippet you can use to find unquoted service paths. Another issue is service permissions. So everything can be locked down. The binary can be locked down. The path to the software can be locked down. But if the service permissions are misconfigured, then an attacker still might be able to abuse the service. So this is an example of where we see on the left-hand side, everyone has something called service all access. So this directory was perfectly fine. This totally legit, directory didn't have any misconfigured permissions, but the service was set to service all access. And what that means is I can change the path to the binary, and I can potentially restart it as well. So I change the path to the binary to my malicious one, and then I just restart it, and then it runs my, super duper malicious, totally safe binary. And by the way, access check is a really good tool for checking configurations and permissions on this. So that's what I used here in this left side. You can see access check -C, legit service -L, and it'll list out the permissions there. So super handy tool from the sysinternals suite. Scheduled tasks. So this is probably the most common issue I see with scheduled tasks, and it's that they're running with permissions that are not really needed, or they're overly permissioned. So the way this kind of works is we do an internal pen test. We somehow get access to a server. We get to the tasks and we look and we see that that there's tasks running as a domain admin, for example. The second kind of iteration of this is that the scheduled task might be configured properly. Maybe it's running under some lower privileged account, but the binary itself, or the action, right? It's running something from, say, a file share where everybody has write access. So that's another example that's related to scheduled tasks. I didn't include a screenshot of because I already had a bunch of slides. But scheduled tasks, you want to ensure that they're running under least privilege, and they're not running things from untrusted locations. And I'm jumping ahead of myself on the mitigations or the fixes, but regularly review permissions after software has been installed, especially the services, and look at the installation directory, make sure those are properly permissioned. Look at the service permissions and the scheduled task permissions. Like I said, always try to use least privilege for those tasks and ensure that when you're running those tasks, you're not running scripts or binaries or whatever else from untrusted locations. You're only running them from places that are designed to be only permissive to the accounts that are running that task, if that makes sense. All right. 35 minutes in, we're at number 6. We're cruising. Going a little fast, but that's okay. All users allowed to use PowerShell, PowerShell ISE, PowerShell 7, terminal, etc. This is like another blanket one. And then also PowerShell version 2 available. And the one of my personal favorite, lack of constrained language mode. So PowerShell, if you look at any threat report, if you look at a DFIR report, any threat intel, PowerShell is probably a staple of that. PowerShell is a staple technique. It's a staple tool of all threat actors' playbooks because many environments, many organizations run Windows. PowerShell is ubiquitous with Windows. So it makes sense to just use what you already have. And this report on the left by Red Canary is from this year. This is their threat detection report. PowerShell is number 4 on their top 10 techniques. So PowerShell is still extensively used today by threat actors. It's commonly referred to as fileless malware because it's just scripts. You don't necessarily have to drop a malicious payload or anything like that. You can just run them, quote unquote, in memory, and they're often referred to as fileless malware. One of the most famous one is probably PowerSploit or PowerView. You've probably heard, but there are a ton of PowerShell-based post-exploitation tools that are used by pen testers and most certainly by threat actors as well. So the main takeaways here is implement application control, because that will help you not only restrict PowerShell, but it'll help you restrict things like CMD and terminal, other living off the land binaries like certutil. It'll help you block RMM tools, like Atera and AnyDesk, TeamViewer, all those RMM tools that you'll see threat actors kind of gravitating towards now. You can block all those with an application control product. It can help you block legit tools, tools that you don't need to be running in your environment. Vulnerable driver exploits as well. Great for blocking that. The other recommendation is constrained language mode. One of the things that gives us the most trouble, and we've seen it 2 weeks in a row now, is the client has had application control. They haven't had PowerShell version 2. They've implemented constrained language mode, and it really makes it very difficult to operate on the endpoint when you can't use PowerShell. Now, you could argue a lot of threat actors are using, malware or using non-PowerShell based things, but why give the attackers the ability to get on second base, third base, whatever it might be? So I have a episode here we did on the podcast if you want to listen to that. And then I also wanted to mention that there's kind of 3 levels of application control, in my opinion. There's like the good, better, and best, or more better. First step, good, if you just want to get something right out of the gate, is software restriction policies. You can block PowerShell with that for regular users. It's not foolproof by any means. There's a lot of gaps with it, but it's better than nothing. App Blocker is great. It's built into Windows again. It's free essentially. All it is your time, but there are some, administrative burdens with App Blocker. And then the best option, in my opinion, is WDAC or some sort of third-party solution that gives you a lot of quality of life improvements. So if you're going the App Blocker route, it's great. I definitely recommend, getting a handle on all your rules and using something to help you create the rules and audit the rules, which is why I created App Blocker Inspector. This is a free tool I created last week to audit App Blocker rules and look for weak or insecured or misconfigured App Blocker rules. So if you're allowing like C*, right? If you're allowing everything to execute, or if you're allowing executables from a shared drive, or a lot of different things. This looks at a lot of different misconfigurations. And Michael Hag, who maybe is still here, he helped create this really fancy HTML report that gives you, the critical insights of like what is wrong with your App Blocker policy. and what you should do to fix it. So if you're using App Locker, definitely check that resource out. Like I said, App Control for Business, previously called WDAC, super great. App Locker is more, user mode. WDAC's more kernel mode. There's more features. This is like the flagship app control product that Microsoft is continuing to improve and provide updates for. App Locker is kind of not being thought about anymore. It's gone to the wayside by Microsoft in Microsoft's world. Again, if you are using App Locker, or if you are a Windows shop and you use attack surface reduction rules, two really great free resources I want to direct you to, again, by Michael Hagg, is ASR Gen and App Locker Gen. So ASR Gen, if you do attack surface reduction rules, these are super great to help you create rules, test your rules, make sure they're operating how you expect them to. Super great free tool. There's a link for it there. App Locker Policy Generator. Again, if you use App Locker, you know that it's not always the easiest thing to configure those policies, to update them. So run App Locker Policy Generator. It'll help you, create your policies. And then App Locker Inspector is included in that also. So you can audit your policies as well and kind of find out which ones are misconfigured, and then build policies that are a little bit tighter and more restrictive. And then my final plug for application control is a company called Magic Sword. Super great new tool for application control. Full transparency, they're friends of mine, and they did give me a coupon. If anybody wants to try it, just DM me and I will hook you up with that. But I wanted to mention it because of this trend of third-party software that I think is super great product, and really goes a long way to blocking threats and making your threat detection a lot easier, respond to threats quicker. Super great stuff. So cool thing to go check out. Now, number 7, we're speeding along. We're flying 42 minutes, feeling good. We're right on track. So number 7 is MFA on RDP, but PS remoting not restricted. It's kind of a mouthful, I guess. But this is the case where, so I'm seeing MFA implemented more and more on internal pen tests, which is great. So for example, I'll compromise an admin account, or I'll find a credential for a service or for an admin account somewhere on a network share, or we'll get an admin password somehow. We'll try to use that to RDP to the domain controller or RDP to a server, and it'll be blocked. For example, it'll be blocked by Duo or some other MFA product. Well, the downside of that is that there are other protocols that we can connect to or use to access that machine remotely, because a lot of these MFA products are only protecting RDP. There are other protocols like SMB. There are protocols like WinRM, which is what PS remoting uses. So in the case where we're blocked by MFA for RDP, we can use PS remoting to access that server, for example. And PS remoting is enabled by default on servers. So as long as you have administrative access, you can just use PS remoting to access those machines. And it's something that's not as well known as I think it should be, which is why I'm calling out in this webinar, is that there are other protocols that should be considered and protected as well. And a little PS statement on this. I was doing a pen test and we actually did this. I got an admin account. I tried to RDP. It created an alert. So the little dialog box, do you want to push to yes to accept? Well, the person who that MFA device belonged to was in a meeting and they didn't see it on their phone. It came up on the screen, but I think it goes away after a minute or something like that. It just disappeared from their screen. And we're that's strange. So we did it again and it happened again. So we could confirm. So my advice on the next slide is alert on those MFA prompts, especially for administrators. Even if it was successful or not successful, you probably want to know if it's outside some sort of baseline, right? If you only connect from your machine to your servers or whatever, and all of a sudden you get an MFA or a failed login or even a successful login from Susie's computer and accounting with that admin account, that'd be something you want to know. And that's not something that you're going to get alert out of by default in many products. So it's something you're going to have to go and configure. The other takeaway for this is restrict these protocols, lock down PS remoting, lock down SMB, and you can use the Windows firewall with group policy. So again, I use ChatGPT. I'm like, hey, create a PowerShell script that will create a firewall rule to block PS remoting, except if it originates from, these IPs. And there you go. Quick and easy. I'm sure that works because ChatGPT is really good at PowerShell. I'd run it without even reviewing it. No, I'm kidding. Obviously, don't run stuff from ChatGPT in production without reviewing it. But the point is, you can use third-party tools. You can use the Windows firewall. But these are things to think about when you're implementing MFA internally. You want to take a look at the other protocols as well. And then, of course, alert on RDP, alert on PS remoting outside of the norm. And the way you figure out the norm is like, what computers do they normally connect from? Anything outside of that is abnormal. And another podcast episode we did on MFA, if you're into podcasts, you can go check that out. This is a super good episode as well. All right. 46 minutes. We're doing good. We're going to finish on time. So these are, just wanted to provide a quick recap and like a summary table of the misconfiguration and the fixes. So we've got weak local admin control, insecurely installed configured software, lack of patching, weak endpoint security, insecure services, unrestricted PowerShell, MFA on RDP, but PS remoting not restricted. So I've got a table that I've just mapped. So for like, if you're like me, I like just having a cheat sheet, if you will, of like, okay, what are the things I got to review in my environment and what are the fixes for it if I do find that thing? So on these two slides, there's, a table here of the misconfig and the fix that you can use to in your environment, if you will. So for everyone who stuck without me this far, I super, super appreciate it. And I promised you I had something for you at the end. I wanted to leave time for questions, but I want to share this with you for everybody that's on the webinar today. If you buy an internal and external pen test, we are going to give you some extra free like goodies and bonuses and things like that. 90 days of free retesting. We normally do 30 days of free retesting. We'll bump that up to 90 days. We're going to include our pen testing extended warranty, which is our fancy way of saying like, hey, we're going to support you above and beyond after the pen testing is done. And how we do that is, let's say we do an external pen test and we find like 12 vulnerabilities. If there's a new vulnerability to something that to some product or technology stack that we didn't originally identify, but it's like brand new, right? In that retesting window, we will go out, we'll test that for you. We'll include that in the report and include that so you can be proactive with those new vulnerabilities that are announced. We're going to do bake-off tests. So this is something that we do where we take the products that you're looking at. If you're shopping around for an EDR product or some sort of AD security product, we'll take those products, we'll do the research, we'll talk to the vendor, we'll kind of bake them off and figure out what makes the product good, what makes it bad, what are the pros and cons of it, and give you kind of a summary report to help you kind of help you consider which product might be best for you and for your environment. For our internal pen tests, we'll include a hybrid AD Entra security review. So that's where, many environments, Active Directory environments are now hybrid, right? You have Entra, you have Active Directory, there's the AD sync and all that's going on. But you also can have misconfigurations where you might have dynamic groups set up in a way that allows users to add themselves to a security group. Or you might have app consent permissions set that, all users can consent to applications. So there's a lot of these kind of nuanced privilege escalation flaws that exist in Entra, especially in hybrid environments. So we have a security review process as part of our internal that we're going to put into this bundle for people who buy an internal and external pen test. And then finally, our internal prioritized remediation plan. This is where we take all of the findings from our internal pen test and we rank them based on the impact, the severity, how important it is, and we'll give you kind of our recommendation for how you should remediate it and in what order. And all that for everybody who's listening, whether you're a current client, existing, or new, everybody gets this if they buy an internal and external pen test. But For everybody still here, I have something else for everybody else. So there's more. As the ShamWow. No, he's not the ShamWow guy, is he? No, I'm thinking of another guy. But anyways, so I've got a checklist that I created. I created it for this webinar, and I wanted to give back again to a tool for people to take away to kind of deliver on that promise of providing tools and content and education for people who might get value from it. So this is not a complete toolkit by any means, but these are some of my favorite tools for when I do endpoint evaluations or when I'm doing an internal pen test and I want to look for misconfigurations or insecure settings or things like that related to Windows endpoints. These are the tools that I use. And if you've gotten a pen test report from me before, or you've heard me talk, you know just by looking at the screen, a lot of these are probably pretty familiar. But in this is just a quick cheat sheet of what it is, how I use it, why I use it kind of thing, and the value it can provide. So that is free. There'll be a link at the end of this that you can go and download it from. The second thing is I created this white paper. So real quick story on this. We do hundreds of pen tests every year, and we speak to a lot of people, both who are consumers of our pen tests, but also peers of ours. And we've put together kind of the red flags related to internal pen tests. And these red flags are things that would indicate maybe you didn't get as much value as you thought you were going to get from your internal pen test. So these are 10 things that are taken directly from the pen tests that we do, the people that we speak to, the clients that we work with. What are their headaches? What are their pain points? And this is designed to show you what like the red flag is. Maybe it's, for example, lack of good screenshots and kind of evidence in the report. It'll show you what the red flag is, what it should look like, and some questions and what to ask of the pen test firm, whether it's us or anybody else, what you should be asking and what you should be looking for in an internal pen test report, so you know what's good versus what's not good. And you can take this, you can use it, you can ask other pen test firms these same questions, and you'll be good to go. The third thing is this free DMARC security white paper that Tyler Roberts, one of our pen testers, wrote. So if you are dealing with email at all or email security, DMARC is something you should definitely consider. And this is a very quick, short read that says what DMARC is, why you need it, and how to configure it properly to really protect against email spoofing. So all that you can get from our website. The link is on the screen, securit360.com/free-gifts. So when you fill out that form, there'll be a download page and you just download them and they'll be right there on that page. Those are completely free just from the opt-in on the website for you guys. Again, I created these for this webinar to give back to you guys. I'm not going to post these on Twitter. I'm not going to post these on social media. This is just for you guys who are coming to the webinar, who have made it this far. So I have one more thing. I have 3 PowerShell scripts. They're super basic scripts, but they're very effective. I use these same scripts on my pen tests to find plain text credentials. You can get them from my landing page for my newsletter. All you have to do is go to go.spencerlessie.com/creds, sign up for my newsletter, and on that, once you confirm, click the link in the email subscription thing to confirm your subscription, you'll get a download, a zip file with these scripts in it. These are, like I said, they're very to the point. There's not a lot of comments. These are just my raw scripts that I use to find plain text credentials. So you can use them, steal them. Hope you get value from them. They're all for you. So that's it. Again, just to reiterate, free gifts, securit360.com/free gifts. Hope you got value from this webinar. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for being here. Appreciate it. I will chat with you all on X, Twitter, LinkedIn, everywhere else, newsletter. Thank you all.